In this episode, I'm gonna create exception handler extension method. Okay, so right click on the extensions, add class, give it a name as exception middleware extensions. Okay, so it's gonna be static. Also method gonna be static. Configure exception handler. Okay, accept the parameter as web application, then iLogger manager. Okay, all right, first thing first, let's register the configure exception handler in the program.cs file. So what we need to do, app dot configure exception handler. It is looking for logger, so var logger equal app dot services dot get required services, which is iLogger manager. So, and we can pass the logger to the exception handler. Okay, so here what we can do, app dot use, oops, okay, I forgot to provide the parameter name, app dot use exception handler, which is app error. Okay, so app error dot run sync context okay, so context dot response status code, which is gonna be default status code http status code internal server. Okay, and we can also specify response dot content type application JSON. Now context feature equal context dot features dot get exception handler feature control dot use Microsoft ASP NET Core feature diagnostics. If context feature is not null, first of all we can log the error. Oops, it's gonna be error. So in the error we can say maybe endpoint, right? Endpoint is gonna be context feature dot endpoint. After that we can say /n error context feature dot error. Okay, then await context dot response write async new error detail, right? So we need to create that error detail object. So I have to create a folder under shared project and give it a name error model. Then create a class, give the name error detail. This is gonna be public class. Remove unnecessary using statements there. Okay, so here first parameter is gonna be integer status code, second parameter is gonna be string type message, third parameter is gonna be like override method, override toString. Okay, so in the toString what we can do, we can use JSON serializer dot serialize of this, build it. Okay, it's gonna throw exception, I guess. Yeah, so here what we need to do, we need to specify the status code. Oops. Okay, we need to control dot add the new using a statement. Okay, status code equal context dot response dot status code, and message is gonna be either we can hard code it here like internal server error, or we can also provide the actual error message that comes from the exceptions. Okay, then we need to use toString. That's it. Okay, so let's put a breakpoint here. Then so delete product, right? It was throwing 500 internal server error earlier, right? Now if we send it, the request is throwing the exception, new exception type, continue, context feature, right? And it's logging the error, and finally throwing that error message, including that the custom error message, right? Now it's little better. Now it is throwing still 500, but we have the error message. So that was for delete method, right? So let's go to the delete service here, right? So this is a general exception. So what we can do, we can create a custom error type or exception type. Okay, so for that let's create a folder and give it a name exceptions. Okay, under exceptions let's create a class, and that is gonna be bad request exception. Okay, public, and that will inherit from exceptions. Remove unnecessary using a statement, controller, accept a parameter, call it a message, and pass it to the base class message. Okay, So where is the product service? Instead of returning exception, we can now return bad request control dot get the namespace exception. Right now we can identify the exception type. Earlier it was like a generic exception. Now we have a like custom type exception, which is bad request exceptions. Okay, if we have a bad request exception type, then we can also take that advantage and configure the status code, right? So the issue is here now with the status code, right? It should be bad request. Okay, so what we can do, context response status code that we need to update. So what we are getting from context, error. Now we have multiple error. One of them is general exception, other one is bad request exception, right? So we can use switch statement here. So if we get any bad request exception, then we can assign the status code as like status 400, yeah, 400 bad request. Otherwise underscore is gonna be like status codes internal server error, right? 500 internal server error. Okay, now we got a new type of exceptions, right? If the error is like a bad request from the product service, which is this one, right? Then it will assign the status code 400, which is a bad request, right? Then we will send that status code to the response in the error detail object. Okay, let's run it. Send the request. So now bad request exception. Okay, it's over here. We can step in. You see, this is like a bad request, a status bad request exception. So it's gonna assign the 400. Continue. You see, now it is a bad request, not anymore 500 internal server error. Now we have bad request, a status code is 400, and also we have the custom message. Okay, so we can use that bad request in the update product also, right? If the product is not available, we can say this is a bad request, right? Because the product GUID is not available, and that also return the message, which is fine. Now let's see if we can create a separate exception type. Let's say get product by ID. If product is null, right, then we can throw new exception that saying that product GUID product ID is not able, this product is not available, right? So that is gonna be like maybe not found exception. Okay, so let's create that exception, not found exception, public exceptions Okay, parameter is gonna be message, the base message, or we can keep it in the same, right? Build it, it will throw exception because we did not assign it here. It's gonna be bad request exception, and the error message, it is gonna be product GUID, product ID. We can actually say it here, product GUID. Doesn't exist, right? So if we throw this exception, then we have to catch that exception here as a new type, which is not found exception. If that is the case, then a status code is gonna be 404, not found. Let's give it a try. So that is for get product by ID. So earlier it was showing no content if there is no product. Now let's see how it displays here. Send. Okay, bad request exception, product GUID doesn't exist. Continue, right? So step over, it is saying bad request. Why? Okay, so it's supposed to be not found exceptions, right? Instead of bad request, not found exception. Okay, let's restart. Send, not found exception. Okay, step over, you see now it is assigning 404, which is not found exception. Now if you see, now the error status is now 404 not found. So this is the valid status code for in this scenario, because we tried to get a product by ID, but the product is not found, right? So 404, and also we have the message here. Okay, so that's pretty good, right? So we can similarly we can create any custom exception message, right, in the similar fashion. Now how can we use that in the controller level? Let's say the get products, right, it has an exception. If there is an exception happen during this method execution in somewhere, right, that can be internal server error, right? So in that case, that is also valid. But if the exception is coming from the get all products, right, if there is anything happen in this method, so that is, let's say it is throwing an exception here, throw new exception, like let's say any error message, like maybe error. I'm just creating this one, right? So if there is an error happened, so what would happen, it would log in here, it would throw the exception, it would come back to product controller, then it will catch in here, right? It will throw again internal server error as an exception, right? So that is gonna be the like internal server error, because it didn't specify any type. So by default it will be internal server error. Let's give it a try. Okay, we see it is unhandled exception. It's supposed to be error, but we are overriding that exception. If you see, it is internal server error. So it will return the internal server error to the client. And in the get all products, we see the 500 internal server error. Okay, but it could happen like some other error. Let's say if there is an error here which is, let's say, not found, right? So we are expecting a not found exception, right, for this method. Let's send the request. So it says internal server error. It come in here. It is going to the internal server error, not the not found error. And if we see, it is internal server error. Why it is? Because we catch that exception here, and also we did overwrite that exceptions, whatever it is, right? And we are saying it is internal server error, and we did not care about that exception. So how can we handle that? So we can catch another exception here, exception which is the bad request exception, right? Was it a bad request exception? Not found exception. So that is we are going to handle here. If we receive any not found exception, right, instead of modifying and creating a new exception, we can simply throw that exception. Okay, now let's put a breakpoint also here. Let's see. So we did throw exception here. See, from the product service, the error. Now it will throw again from there. Now it came in here. You see, now it is pointing to the right direction because error is the 404 not found exception. The type is not found exceptions. So it will return, let's say, send it from here. I want to see error status code is 404 and message is error, whatever you type it, whatever you like, right? So for my testing I added simply error. So this was for like testing purposes, right? So we can catch the exception by type also. If we do not specify the type, if we specify the exception, so that is a generic exception. That means it will catch all sort of error under the exceptions. So but if you have a custom exception, then you have to catch it before that exception. The same way you can implement the try catch block here for the get product by ID, update product, right, delete product, add product. So your homework is gonna be to add the try catch block for the get product by ID, update product, delete product, right? Because in these methods I did use either not found exception or bad request exception. So here we have to catch that one, then we can throw that same exception, right? And for other cases it is gonna be like internal server error, right? Because we know that the exception type here, but for all other cases we do not know what could be the exception here. So that's why we are sending a generic message to the client. But as soon as you know the exception type, then you can specify the exception like this one. And one more thing, since we now have the exception, a status type, we do not need that code anymore. You can comment it out. Okay, all right, so that's all in this lesson. in this episode. If you are having any issue like in this episode, please let me know through the comment box. Guys, please like and subscribe my channel. If possible, share the video with others, and also please let me know your thought. If you have any opinion, any suggestion, feedback, through the comment box. Thank you so much.